Eevee is one of Pokemon's most recognizable icons, right behind Pikachu in franchise mascot status, and I think its reputation is well earned. Not only is it a simple and cute creature design, perfect for merchandise, it has one of the best and most beloved gimmicks in the entire series. Eevee has the most different evolutions in the entire game, with 8 possible forms it can evolve into, all with completely different types and roles. These are referred to as Eeveelutions in the community, and they are all fan favorites. One Pokemon having 8 distinct evolutions is an amazing concept, linking all these Pokemon together as if they're a family. And all of these Eeveelutions have simple yet elegant designs that players have grown very fond of. I think that Eevee and its Eeveelutions are a perfect encapsulation of why Pokemon is the most popular franchise in the world. They capture the imagination and give the player a sense of choice, making their Pokemon journey feel personalized and special. It also helps that they are extremely reliable and solid Pokemon for in-game playthroughs with good stats and move pools. Any of these Eeveelutions could be your favorite, and I would not fault you. On the competitive side of things, the Eeveelutions are an interesting bunch. While they are all pretty solid Pokemon in a vacuum, these Eeveelutions tend to find themselves outclassed by other options that share their type, and some are just straight up underwhelming in a competitive context. But these Eeveelutions have had their moments throughout the years, and some can be called competitively viable, depending on the generation. Let's take a look at every single one of these Eeveelutions and rank them from worst to best in a competitive context. I'll be focusing on competitive singles for this list, since there are more generations and formats to talk about there. But first, I'm going to sit here and fantasize about Eeveelution merchandise that I don't have access to. A lot of the coolest Pokemon merchandise in the world is only available in Japan, you see, and I'm stuck all the way over here in Australia like an absolute buffoon. But wait a moment. A solution to my problem is descending before me. It looks like I can get various Eeveelution merchandise items from ZenMarket.jp, my favorite website. ZenMarket is a proxy shopping service that helps you buy and ship goods directly from Japanese sites like a local, without needing to know Japanese or have access to a Japanese address. Just search for an item you want. I'll search for Eevee, and look at that, it's the most beautiful Eevee clock I've ever seen, with all the different Eeveelutions on it. This is sold from the Japanese store Rakuten, and you can buy from 10,000 plus Japanese stores through ZenMarket. ZenMarket is trusted by 2 million plus users worldwide, and there are many shipping and payment methods to choose from. ZenMarket is offering a free sign-up bonus with promo code JIMOTHYCOOL. You will receive 1,000 ZenPoints, which equates to 1,000 yen off international shipping fees. That's 1,000 free ZenPoints for signing up with promo code JIMOTHYCOOL. Thank you to ZenMarket for sponsoring this video. The worst of the Eeveelutions competitively should come as no surprise to most of you. It is Glaceon, unfortunately. A cool Pokemon design, but this has the curse of being an ice type, and if you're familiar at all with competitive Pokemon, you know ice types have a serious uphill battle and most are unviable, generally speaking. Usually if you're an ice type, you need to be really fast and offensively threatening to function well. That's the rule of thumb, because the ice type has so many weaknesses, especially that rock weakness. Every time you come onto the field, you're taking a quarter of your HP just for switching in. Having all those weaknesses sucks, and you don't even have any resistances to show for it, really. Ice type only resists itself. Glaceon does have good stats, with impressive special attack and defense in particular, but that physical defense feels completely wasted on an ice type. You are already weak to so many physical attacking types. Using this to tank physical hits is just probably not going to be very realistic. Glaceon is also a little bit too slow to function as an ice type special attacker, despite its fantastic special attack stat. You do have a good move pool, and as I said, these Eeveelutions tend to have good move pools. Freeze Dry especially is a great option, an ice type attack that hits water super effectively. Ice Stab is very threatening. It's a fantastic offensive type, so you get that going for you. Shadow Ball is okay coverage, I suppose. Probably the best way to go with this is with a choice spec set, and there is some merit to Glaceon on Hail or Snow teams. In Gen 9, Hail was changed to Snow, and instead of having the chip damage effect that Hail used to have, Ice types now gain a 1.5x defense boost in the Snow, so Glaceon has that advantage, boosting its already high defense stat in the Snow. On top of that, Glaceon also has the ability Ice Body, which grants a chip healing effect if Snow is active, so it has some defensive value in Snow. Unfortunately, it's an Ice type, so that all feels like a complete waste because you're weak to everything on the planet. Snow Cloak is another ability option granting evasion in the snow, but in competitive singles, evasion effects are banned, so you're not able to use that. And even if you could, it's not very good, to be honest. It's relying on dodging stuff, which is inconsistent. Glaceon, unfortunately, doesn't make up for all the shortcomings of being an ice type, and even beyond its ice typing, its stat distribution is a little bit bizarre with high special attack, high defense, and low speed. Is it supposed to be a bulky attacker? It can't really. It has a strange set of strengths that in practice feel at odds with one another. And up next is an Eeveelution that suffers from very similar issues, and that is Flareon. Flareon has existed since the very first Pokemon game. It's one of the original Eeveelutions, but it was always the worst in that original trio, and to this day, it is among the worst. Flareon has had a strange identity ever since its inception because it is a fire-type Pokemon, which is better than ice-type, I'll give it that. Mono Fire can work as a typing, but the stat spread is a little bit all over the place. You have a high attack stat of 130, high special defense, and low speed and HP. So you're a bulky physical attacking special wall with no speed to speak of. In the early generations, this didn't really work because fire type attacks couldn't even be physical, so you can't take advantage of that high attack with any stab option. You can only use your pretty limited neutral physical attacking moveset, probably something like Return or Double Edge, and not much else really. So it's a stat spread that didn't complement what the Pokemon had available to it at the time. In Gen 4, of course, the physical special split did happen, and Flareon can now use options like Flare Blitz to deal physical fire damage, and it hits very hard with that, but it's too slow. It is suffering from Stealth Rock weakness. It has competition from Pokemon like Infernape. Flareon can sort of function as a utility defensive Pokemon. In Gen 3, some players have used Flareon for this purpose. It does have the ability Flash Fire, which grants an immunity to fire and a boost to fire type attacks if struck by a fire move. A Wish Protect set is decent to wall mixed attackers since you are immune to fire and resist grass, and you have a high special defense. Flareon also has an immunity to Will-O-Wisp, which is unique to it compared to other similar Wish passing Pokemon, which helps it against Gengar in Gen 3. But that's a very niche role, and it's very, very rarely seen. Even then, its HP is low, it's frail in other areas, it's not very functional in that department either. It definitely seems like the original vision of this Pokemon to be some sort of guy who can take hits and also deal damage simply didn't work in practice, and it's always had an uphill battle. It did receive Guts in Generation 5, which is an ability that grants 1.5x attack if you're statist. So you can throw a Toxic Orb on this and hit pretty hard with Facade and Flare Blitz and such. But again, it's just too slow for that, and the special defense isn't doing you many favors when your fire typing leaves you vulnerable to a lot. So Flareon just unfortunately kind of doesn't work. Despite being kind of iconic as one of the original Eeveelutions, it always did have that reputation of being the worst one. Up next is Leafeon, the grass type Eeveelution. This is one of my favorites. I love the visual of it. It looks very magical. Unfortunately, competitively speaking, it isn't the greatest thing in the world. Its debut wasn't too bad. It came out in Gen 4, a later released Eeveelution, and it's ranked UU in that generation. Not too bad, to be honest. In that format, it's very functional thanks to its high speed of base 95, which was quite good for the time. It's good natural bulk with 130 defense and a very, very solid 110 attack. Leafeon can use Swords Dance to boost itself up and stab Leaf Blade, which hits very hard. It's a pretty straightforward physical sweeper Pokemon. Leafeon's ability is Leaf Guard, which isn't very exciting. If Sun is active, you cannot be statist. Unfortunately, it doesn't cure status if it's already happened, and you also can't use Rest while Sunny Day is active. So not a great ability. This is more of an aggressive Pokemon. It doesn't really get super good use out of the status immunity provided by this in the Sun, and Sun is temporary, so temporary status immunity just isn't very good, and if you really want that, you could just use Safeguard. So that feels like a waste. But later it would receive the ability Chlorophyll, which is much better. Chlorophyll is an ability that grants double speed in the Sun, and this is a fantastic offensive ability that is very good on Sun teams, and one of the reasons to run Sun teams, in fact. In later games, Leafeon will get the option Solar Blade, a physical version of Solar Beam that can bypass its own charging effect if Sun is active, further enhancing that Sun synergy. And Leafeon also gained Knockoff for more physical coverage. Leafeon also has X Scissor as a pretty nice physical coverage option too. That's a bug type attack. In most generations, those sun teams are fringe viable at best compared to rain teams, which tend to be the more dominant weather. And if you are running a sun team, you're probably running a different chlorophyll Pokemon like Venusaur, who has sleep and better coverage options that are more widely threatening. Leafeon is kind of easy to wall and isn't providing much to your team in terms of utility compared to other chlorophyll Pokemon you could choose. Even recently, in Gen 9, Hisuian Lilligant was added to the game, who is a superior chlorophyll Pokemon. And Leafeon also has been outclassed by many of the photosynthesis Pokemon added in Gen 9. Leafeon in a vacuum is pretty solid. It's got good stats, good natural bulk, an okay physical attacking move pool, and the straightforward boosting option of Swords Dance, but unfortunately it tends to be outclassed by other similar Pokemon much of the time. Up next is Espeon, the Psychic type Eeveelution and a fan favorite, a beautiful Pokemon that actually, all things considered, is pretty solid competitively. It's got some accolades to its name. Debuted in Generation 2, where it's ranked in UUBL and has a viable niche as a Growth Sweeper. Growth is a special attacking option in Gen 2 to boost special attack by 1 stage. May not sound like much, but back in Gen 2, special attack boosts were very scarce, so Espeon had that going for it. In Gen 3, Espeon also has a viable niche, and I've used it quite a bit. I think it's a little underrated, actually. Espeon is a Carmined Baton Pass Pokemon, so you can use Espeon to pass boosts to an ally and power it up. Espeon is competing majorly with Celebi for this role. Celebi tends to be better with its superior move pool and typing, but Espeon has the advantage of being quite significantly faster than Celebi, reaching up to 350 speed and significantly outrunning most Gengar sets and threatening them with Stab Psychic. Espeon can also match up well against enemy Celebi that is trying to set up on it, and with Substitute and Carmine, you can actually really punish enemy Celebi. Synchronize is the ability Espeon got in Gen 3, which has its uses. Synchronize means if you're statused, you will mirror the same status ailment to the enemy, as long as it's not sleep or freeze. Those ones don't count. But if you get Toxic, for example, the enemy will get Toxic too. That has its value. And you can come in on something like a Zapdos and paralyze them in turn. And for the time, Espeon's stats were very good. 110 base speed and 130 special attack is very solid. In Generation 5, Espeon also got a significant boost upon receiving the ability Magic Bounce. Magic Bounce is one of the best abilities in the whole game. This will bounce back various advantageous effects to the enemy. These include status ailments like Toxic, Thunderwave, Will-O-Wisp, etc. Utility moves like Roar will have no effect and be mirrored back to the enemy. And most notably of all, Stealth Rock and Spikes, the entry hazards, will have no effect on your side of the field and in fact bounce back to the enemy. It's easy to see why that's such an amazing ability with all of the incredible ways to use it. And Espeon was a very controversial Pokemon at a point, because Espeon is part of the reason that Baton Pass is banned in most generations. Magic Bounce is incredibly broken alongside Baton Pass because you can pass the stats to Espeon, and if they try to Roar or Whirlwind or Taunt, all the counterplay to boosting chains gets bounced back. So Espeon is the whole reason that Baton Pass was as broken as it was, because Espeon could simply preserve the boosts by denying all the counterplay, or most of it, from the boosting chains that you could achieve. So Espeon had a very high peak there as the crux of a game-breaking strategy, but that did get banned. So I don't know if you could count that as a point in Espeon's favor, since it's an illegal strategy now. Magic Bounce Espeon in current day is a little bit awkward to use. Magic Bounce is a little bit better on Pokemon that are bulky. In Gen 5, Xatu is preferable as a Magic Bounce Pokemon thanks to its Psychic Flying typing, meaning it's immune to ground and spikes, and it also has access to Roost and U-turn to pivot out and a bit more utility going on. Espeon is frail on the defensive side. It isn't a very good defensive typing, just Mono-Psychic, you're weak to a lot, so Magic Bounce can be useful, of course, but a little bit hard to take advantage of. Espeon has had uses on modern hyper offense teams because of its Magic Bounce, its decent speed stat, and it can be quite good in Psychic terrain. With Psychic terrain, you are immune to priority moves, and your Psychic type moves deal a lot of damage. You can also use stored power to scale the more you boost up. That can be very good. Overall, Espeon does struggle in most generations to be viable, but decent Pokemon in the early gens, and of course had that game-breaking Magic Bounce strategy in the middle there. Up next is Umbreon, and this is actually overall a pretty good competitive Pokemon who deserves some respect. And it's one of the most popular Pokemon in the world, I think, with that one trading card that is worth more than me probably. It's easy to see why. Very aesthetic Pokemon and a pretty fun one to use. Umbreon is a mono dark type, and it is a bulky mono dark type with high HP, defense, and special defense. And unlike some of these other Eeveelutions, this one has a clear role it was supposed to play in mind. It's not all over the place, it's specialized. It's a special wall with all the stats that service that, and it also has Wish for support and healing. It has also Pursuit, and Pursuit is the reason to use this in early gens. In Gen 2, Umbreon is an OU ranked Pokemon. It's a good Pokemon in the Gen 2 competitive metagame. With Charm, it can hold its own against Snorlax and other physical sweepers, and with Pursuit, you are able to trap and eliminate Gengar. In Gen 3, Umbreon's not quite ranked OU, but it does have its role here. It gained the ability Synchronize in this gen, which is the same ability shared with Espeon at the time, and it's kind of a perfect fit on this Pokemon because Gengar is the main thing that you want to Pursuit trap in this generation. And Gengar commonly uses Will-O-Wisp. So if you come in and get burned by Will-O-Wisp, you synchronize the burn to them, and that's really good for you because you're trying to get rid of Gengar. And now they have burned themselves and they're taking a lot of damage over time. Umbreon is very distinct from other Pursuit users in Gen 3, thanks to its great defensive stats, access to Wish, and that Synchronize interaction it can pull off. The other Pursuit options in Gen 3 include Tyranitar and Houndoom, who are both very different to Umbreon. Umbreon stands out and has a distinct role. Much like how Espeon has a bit of a controversial past using illegal strategies, so did Umbreon at certain points with its Mean Look, Baton Pass strategies. If you weren't aware, Mean Look, even though it's an effect that applies to the enemy, actually stays on the enemy if you click Baton Pass. So for example, if you have Umbreon, you click Mean Look and trap the enemy with you, then you Baton Pass out, the opponent is still trapped even though your Umbreon has switched, because the Baton Pass is preserving Mean Look on the enemy. This had some game-breaking applications. Umbreon could trap things with it and spam debuffs like Sand Attack or Charm to the point where the enemy has become completely useless. Once they are at their minimum possible stats and with no hope of ever switching out either, they can Baton Pass to a sweeper and take advantage of the weakened enemy to set up and sweep an entire team. This could be used in Gen 2 and Gen 3 actually. Because of Umbreon, the combination of trapping moves such as Mean Look or Spiderweb and Baton Pass is banned. Umbreon was the best abuser of this strategy. Umbreon's OU viability wouldn't last forever as, power creep increased over the years, but in the modern times it's ranked RU, which is pretty respectable for such an old Pokemon, and especially because many of its Eevee brothers are ranked all the way down in ZU and completely unviable in higher tiers. RU is not that bad these days. I mean, a lot of Pokemon that were once meta are now ranked RU in Gen 9, like Chansey and Bishop, and Empoleon and Forretress, even Gengar. So Umbreon has some familiar faces to make it feel at home in Gen 9 RU, I suppose. Up next is Sylveon, one of the more powerful Eevee forms in a vacuum. Sylveon is the fairy type Eeveelution introduced in Gen 6 when the fairy type first came out. It was kind of the mascot for the all new type at the time, and it's a pretty functional, bulky attacker Pokemon. Sylveon has high HP, high special defense, and a really good special attack too, of base 110. Sylveon also has the excellent ability Pixelate, which converts normal type moves into fairy type moves and boosts their power by 1.2x. Sylveon crucially has Hyper Voice, which is a normal type sound-based attack, but of course with Pixelate it becomes fairy and it has more than 100 base power too. Since it's sound-based, it also goes through Substitute, so this is a pretty fantastic attack here. I remember Sylveon being pretty popular in Gen 6 OU when that gen first came out, probably because of New Toy Syndrome, and it was the cool new Eeveelution, so people wanted to use it. Unfortunately for Sylveon, a lot of its spotlight was taken away by Clefable at the time. Clefable was converted from a normal type into a fairy type in Gen 6, and because of its ability Magic Guard, which is a much better ability, it is the superior Pokemon competitively. It also has a better move pool, better utility, options like Stealth Rock, etc. Sylveon does beat Clefable in terms of raw damage output, and in doubles, Sylveon is pretty viable over the years. Hyper Voice is able to hit both opponents, and with its good, simple mono defensive fairy typing, which is a solid thing to have, it can function there. I also recall Sylveon being pretty viable in the Gen 8 metagame before any DLC came out in the initial drop, just because it is a mono fairy type with solid attacks, options like Wish, etc. And that was just good. I also think in the early Gen 9 metagame, people were experimenting with Sylveon as a Calm Mind Terra Sweeper, with Draining Kiss and Hyper Voice to bypass sub, etc. Choice Specs Sylveon is also a good option for a breaker. And that had a moment in the sun in Gen 9 too as a niche fairy type special attacking breaker. For the most part though, Sylveon finds itself outclassed by other fairy types in every gen that it exists. I mean, in Gen 7 there's Magearna, the Tapus, etc. There's not much wrong with Sylveon necessarily, it is just a crowded type, the fairy type. It's crowded and often it's getting outclassed by other options. But fundamentally, this is a very good Pokemon. It's had its competitive moments here and there, and I think I would give it the respect. You could argue that Umbreon's a bit better because it was ranked OU, but I almost think that's a bit unfair because Umbreon existed earlier in the series. Sylveon deserves some respect for being very fundamentally solid. Up next is Vaporeon, the water-type evolution, one of the original Gen 1 evolutions, and it always defined itself as the more defensive of the bunch. Water typing is famously a great defensive type throughout every generation, and Vaporeon had the stat spread to take advantage of that for absolute cert, with a monstrous base 130 HP being its premier stat, which is very good, and a really solid 110 special attack as well. Vaporeon wasn't the best in its debut game of Gen 1, but in Gen 2, Vaporeon stood out from other water types with its access to growth for that special attack boosting, and being an effective rest talk wall on top of that. That was a unique set of traits at the time and enough for OU status. In Gen 3, Vaporeon is unfortunately ranked UUBL, not quite OU status here, but this is one of the better BL ranked Pokemon in Gen 3 in my opinion. It is very good, and it definitely stands out from other water types. The big competition here is Suicune, who is the most dominant water type in Gen 3, and there's also Melodic, a strong, neutral defensive Pokemon with Recover and Refresh and stuff. The Vaporeon sets itself apart from both of them with its ability Water Absorb, and in fact it kind of matches up well into both of them. They often only run Surf as an attacking move, especially Suicune. Mono-attacking Suicune is a very common set in Gen 3. Relying specifically on Rest Talk, Calm Mind, and Surf as its only move, trying to just power through resistances with sheer boosting and winning in an endgame like that. But Vaporeon completely shuts down enemy Suicune thanks to its immunity to water. Vaporeon's high HP also means that it can create a 101 health substitute without very much investment at all in HP. It can throw all the rest of those stats anywhere at once, like special attack and speed. This gives Vaporeon a hyper offense role. Lead Vaporeon has the natural bulk to actually 1v1 Zapdos, because you take a Thunderbolt from them and counterattack with Ice Beam. Thunderbolt will put you in the precise HP range to eat a Select Berry, and now you will be outrunning Zapdos and threatening them with a KO with another Ice Beam. You can baton pass that speed boost to a teammate, keeping the aggression going, and this is a fantastic hyper offense opener. Vaporeon can also be used as a defensive Pokemon with Wish, Protect, or Baton Pass to pivot out. In Generation 5, Vaporeon received the ability Hydration, which is an amazing new ability to get. Hydration will cure the Pokemon's status ailments at the end of the turn if Rain is active, which is a much better effect than Leaf Guard, which I mentioned earlier. Hydration is an effective status immunity, and it also has the bonus effect of allowing Rest to be a free full heal. Because if you rest, you fully heal, but then you put yourself to sleep, but hydration will cure the sleep immediately. Vaporeon was pretty good in Gen 5, and it's ranked OU because of its access to hydration and use on permanent rain teams. With high special attack, a good attacking move pool, Hydro Pump boosted by the rain, and that free full heal, as well as complete immunity to any incoming status, this is a pretty scary Pokemon to face in Generation 5. Vaporeon's combination of great bulk, good typing, good move pool, and high special attack have been a recipe for success in many of the early generations. It hasn't really stood up to scrutiny in modern times, with its move pool feeling a bit limited by modern standards and other new water types outclassing it, especially regenerated Pokemon like Toxapex and Alomomola in Gen 9. But I think Vaporeon deserves a lot of respect for its good competitive viability in many generations. And I'm happy calling it the second best evolution of all time. But who's the best? What an incredible question. I am a bit biased here, I will admit. This is my favorite of the Eeveelutions, but I think that Jolteon has the most impressive competitive career of all of the Eeveelutions. From the beginning, this had one of the more functional design concepts, and it's a very simple one. Jolteon has a really high speed stat of 130 base speed and very good special attack to take advantage of that. Base 110 special attack, or special in Gen 1. Jolteon is kind of the blueprint for what a successful electric type would be later on. Fast and specially threatening. Pokemon like this tend to thrive, and Jolteon was the original. Jolteon was once known as the fastest reasonably viable Pokemon in existence. I mean, 130 base speed at this time was unheard of, and even to this day, 130 base speed is still very good. In Gen 1 OU, Jolteon is a viable and even common pick in competitive with its excellent stab, Thunderbolt, double kick to hit Blissey in some fashion, and Thunder Wave to spread paralysis. It's very one-dimensional, but it's straightforward and it works. In Gen 2, Jolteon is a good Pokemon on Baton Pass teams or aggressive teams. It's a fast electric type with access to growth for a special attack boosting option. It often passes stats to teammates in this generation or is a stat receiver from allies. In Gen 3, Jolteon is also ranked OU, and it is one of my favorite Pokemon to use in this format. Jolteon gained the ability Volt Absorb in this generation, granting an immunity to electric moves and even healing if you get hit by one. This makes Jolteon a pretty nice switch in to Zapdos or Gengar or Starmie that are trying to click electric moves. Jolteon complements water types, as it is a safety net against those electric hits that might be used against your water types. Jolteon's speed tier is elite in Gen 3, with base 130 only being rivaled by Aerodactyl. Jolteon is an incredibly effective abuser of spikes. With hidden power to fill out your coverage, you have a powerful stab Thunderbolt and Ice to complement it. Jolteon has access to Baton Pass to pivot out, and Roar to keep pressure up against switch-ins like Blissey or Snorlax. Jolteon has access to Wish for additional utility, Thunder Wave to spread paralysis. It's a simple Pokemon, but it works. Jolteon held onto OU status even in Gen 4 and 5. In modern times, this OU status is dubious, but there were periods of these generations where Jolteon was used enough to maintain this status. Probably just because it's fast, it has a good special attack, and it is straightforward. And that makes it popular and makes it easy to throw onto a team. In modern Gen 4 and 5 OU, you do still see the occasional Jolteon prop up, which is respectable, I think. Jolteon also didn't fall off as hard as the other ones in later generations. Ranked RU in Generation 7. Unfortunately, Jolteon would kind of fall off a cliff from Gen 8 onwards because Hidden Power was removed from the game, and Hidden Power was very important on Jolteon. Without Hidden Power, it doesn't have good coverage to hit ground types, which is imperative for an electric type to exist. It has Shadow Ball as a coverage option and Weather Ball in Gen 8, which can be used on rain teams for a source of water type damage, but those are not fantastic, and it would rather just have an ice type attack. In Gen 9, Jolteon can use Terra Blast to gain coverage, but that's more committal, and at that point it feels like a bit of a waste. Unfortunately, in modern times, Generation 9, Jolteon is ranked ZU because of its lack of good coverage. But maintaining OU viability for 5 straight generations, in my opinion, gives Jolteon the title of best competitive evolution historically. Even if in modern Gen 4 and 5, Jolteon is not as popular as it once was, I think it still has some sort of place in those formats, in their modern state. So Jolteon is not only the coolest and most epic of the Eeveelutions, it is the best. And that does it for my Eeveelution ranking. All these Pokemon are very likable. It's no wonder they're so popular. They look like they could be household pets, but they are fantastical and elemental creatures with special powers. This is the heart of what makes Pokemon appealing to people, and these are iconic Pokemon all around. Who is your favorite Eeveelution? Let me know down below in the comments. And thank you very much for watching.